We aren't here to make ourselves smaller, but to take up space and show the world what we're really capable of. And that's really like my hope and dream from this process. So many feels, but yeah, we would love to see it.
And welcome back. We have Stevie Smith joining on the podcast for her second appearance and first since December of 2021. Stevie, welcome back.
JL, so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Stevie, I've learned a ton from you, and you're a sports dietitian and dog mom and all sorts of other things. But I mainly learned from you on the nutrition side of things, and that's what we are aiming to dive into today, to talk about fueling and nutrition and how to make better decisions as endurance athletes and humans. So, Stevie, excited to have you on, and you know what the next sentence is?
Who is Stevie?
Yes.
Well, you already hit some of the main points. But yes, I am a dog mom to Chance, my German Shepherd Pit Bull mix, 90-pound guy, just had his knee replaced, basically a TPLO. So we're learning all about doggy physical therapy. So maybe, we'll just add that to the resume. I'm just kidding. But yes, I am also a registered dietitian, board certified in sports nutrition. I've been a dietitian for 13 years and been in the sports nutrition space for, oh my God, what's like eight years now? Kind of just like picked it up as I was in clinical nutrition. I am also a small business owner. I have my own online, fully virtual private practice, Stevie Lyn Nutrition, and I work with mostly endurance athletes, runners, the active human who's just looking for ways to better show up for themselves, their families, their communities, what they love to do with nutrition. Very much a whole athlete approach, trying to make sports nutrition accessible, attainable, and like fit into people's lives rather than, bending over backwards and trying to fit a round ball into a square hole when it comes to nutrition.
I love it. We're going to talk a lot about nutrition, but let's start with your journey as an athlete. You found the endurance world as an adult, and that led you into running and triathlon for some reason. Can you talk about how running and triathlon found you?
Yeah, I forget that I'm also an athlete these days. But yeah, I grew up playing team sports. I loved lacrosse. I played soccer and basketball as well, but lacrosse really became my bread and butter per se. And it's funny, I was just at my old high school for the first time. And I saw my JV lacrosse coach for the first time since I graduated high school. And we were reminiscing that basically he just told me at the end of my freshman year, Smith, we need a goalie. You're going to be a goalie. I never picked up a lacrosse stick in my life, but it stuck and I loved it. And I was on varsity my sophomore year, played briefly in college. And I bring all of that up to say is that's how I found endurance sports. I stopped playing team sports, didn't exercise for a whole semester. And I was like, wait a minute. I've only known being active and this being part of my life. So I found running in 2008 and I couldn't run more than a quarter mile at a time, even though I was a collegiate athlete. I hated running. And then the next year I ran my first marathon in 2009.
That's a fast escalation there.
Things escalated very quickly. Yes. This is what happens when you do endurance sports before your prefrontal cortex is fully developed.
Practice safe endurance. Yes.
It was a very different time in 2009. I mean, I trained and I fueled. But yeah, so then I found running and I had a number of stress fractures in the early years, including a femoral neck stress fracture, which was the big wake up call. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to figure out how to swim and get a bike, and did my first triathlon 70.3 in 2011 and did my first full Ironman in 2012. And, many more and lots in between.
What has kept you going in running and triathlon, mostly running, over the years?
Yeah, the friendship. I love the community, the friendship. I mean, I've done a lot of training alone, but over the last like 3 or 4 years, I've done more group running and connecting with people that way. And it's really how I've built community for myself here in Buffalo, but also when I was living in DC. That's how I made all of my friends when I lived in DC. So, it's just one of the things I've always really enjoyed. And, each year running has looked a little bit different, some big cutback years recently, but returned to the marathon this past year. So, even without training for a big race or a big goal, it's still kind of just like always been one of those constants in my life and my routine. And I'm a person who loves a good routine. So we just ride the wave with it,
And what does running look like in your life and routine in 2025?
2025, like I said, I've returned to the marathon this year. I ran the Buffalo Marathon back in May. So, like, in the winter, like, I was really locked in on it and not overdoing it. Like, my peak mileage weeks were only a couple 40-mile weeks. But I was, like, very focused on, I want this to be fun. I want to enjoy training. And this winter, I felt like I was in the headspace where I feel like I could enjoy it. And I really did. And it was like the perfect day, that race day. Like, I had a great time. Like, it was anything you could have asked for in a marathon day, marathon execution, marathon fueling. So I got a lot of joy out of that. And then since then, it's been just, connecting with my friends and doing track night workouts and run club. And obviously, definitely a cutback in mileage. I'm very mindful of not going too hard and getting enough recovery, as I know myself and know to take my own advice. So, we're entering the doldrums here in Buffalo. So running usually backs off a little bit in the winter, give my body a little bit more rest, but also not battle too many horrible conditions.
Yeah, you have about 9 months ahead of winter.
Yes. It was 29 degrees the other morning. And now we're just like in the straight rain phase. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you said that Buffalo Marathon was the perfect day. What goes into producing the perfect day?
Well, I would like to say there's luck involved with that.
Okay, but how do you give yourself the best chance to have a perfect day?
Okay. Yeah, I was so dialed in with my nutrition. Obviously, like, as a sports dietitian, but like, I was locked in the whole training cycle where I was very much, making sure there was none of those like, oopsie, I fell behind this week. I trialed my fueling, practiced lots of different things, did a lot of higher carb fueling and training that I wasn't planning to like do on race day. Like, so, for example, like some of my long treadmill workouts, there would be like a 90-minute, 2-hour tread class I would take in the winter. And I would do like 95 to 100 grams of carb, knowing on race day I was probably going to stick around 80, just for that optimal recovery. I was more generous with my fueling during the weekday workouts. So I wasn't allowing myself to like get behind because, that thought of like, it's only a 45-minute run. I don't technically need to fuel, but I was more generous where I'm like, oh, I'm going to bring some sports drink or a gel. So that was a big one. I was strength training 4 days a week. I really prioritized that. And then I used my swimming background to kind of move the needle with a little bit more aerobic fitness with lower mileage because that's what's good for my body. I like rotated the shoes. I had a pickle pizza almost every Friday night. I slept a lot of sleep. So just like prioritizing some of those basic, boring things. I saw a physical therapist for body work every week, even though I didn't have an injury, just to kind of like stay ahead of things. So I was trying to like hit all of the angles. I wasn't perfect, but like I said, I was locked in.
I love that. Yeah, and it's just like the fundamentals leading to the best chance of success. There were a lot of things in there that I want to like dive deeper into, but let's back up and talk about, so you've been a dietitian for 13 years, you've been involved in sports nutrition for the last 8 years. Mm-hmm. So that's a while in the running world.
Yeah.
What have you seen change over that period of time, particularly in the last 8 years, as it relates to athletes and sports nutrition.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, I say this a lot, is there's so many more options now. We have so many, and I think almost we might have too many options where it's getting confusing and sometimes overcomplicated. And there's too many people who shouldn't be saying things about nutrition, saying things about nutrition. And I don't think all of them are coming from a bad place. Like, I think they have good intentions, but also like there needs to be, I'm seeing a lot of run coaches giving a lot of like nutrition advice that isn't necessarily incorrect, but it's like they've worked with sports RDs or have been around enough sports RDs that they feel qualified to be doing this. And I think that's one of a big thing where it's like, okay, like, yeah, you know these things and you know how to apply it to yourself, which is great, but that doesn't mean you can apply it to your athletes as well. That's a big thing, but like the options on the sports nutrition marketplace. And well, I think it's great. We have different options for fueling and like textures, tastes, carbohydrate, kind of formulas. I think it sometimes gets in a little excess. And I also think like all of the additional things that you can add on, like I'm thinking, and I'm not knocking like recovery boots and things, right? Like I know there's a place and a purpose. I'm just using this as an example because I always laugh. Like I've done 10 Ironmans and I've never owned a pair of recovery boots and I've been just fine. I think with all of the other things that are out there and like more granular supplements and products, people neglect the foundation of sports nutrition. It's just like you don't build a house without a foundation. And like until we have a pretty solid foundation and we can do those basics, like then we can layer in more things. But like your recovery boots aren't going to save you if you aren't like stacking the basics up pretty consistently. And it's boring, right?
Let's talk about that pyramid or that foundation, right? So we have the foundational things that are required for performance. We have the next level up where if you're doing the basics, maybe then you can start thinking about those types of things. And then one level up from that is like maybe spend 1% of your time trialing things that, sound interesting if you're already doing the mid-level stuff and the foundational stuff.
Yep.
How do we make sure we're doing the foundation? What does the foundation look like?
Yeah, so of course it's going to like vary from person to person, right? But like if you are consistently not sleeping enough, 7 to 9 hours a night, like that's a basic, right? Is your training designed in a way that supports adequate rest and recovery? Like rest and recovery are not the same thing. That again is going to look different between individual to individual. And that is also going to change over our lives. Like as we go older, like that should look different. Like right now in this season for me as a 37-year-old woman, I'm like, pry my one rest day a week from my cold dead hands. Like that's a non-negotiable for me at this point. Maybe some athletes, they need one every 2 weeks, but like I see still too many athletes being like, oh, well, I'm just going to train through until the wheels fall off. I crash out and I need a rest day. And like more of that structure, some people are at higher load weeks and deload. For me, load, build 3 weeks, deload every 4 weeks, no matter what. So some of it's training plan, training structure, sleep, nutrition. Like if you can't figure out what you need to eat before a run, during a run, after a run, dial that in, like the supplements aren't going to fix everything. Like fueling your runs is important, right? Like maybe you got your in-run fueling perfected. Like that's great. That's part of the foundation. But if you can't consistently like do a fairly decent job of feeding yourself the rest of the time, your recovery boots, you should focus that energy into like, and that's why I say like sports nutrition that fits your life. Like that's part of my job is coming up with strategies, tools, things you can do to make that nutrition fit into your lifestyle versus like trying to do what every other person is doing if it doesn't fit like what your family needs, what your job, allows you, etc.
What do you say to the person who says, I can't figure out how to eat pre-run, so I don't? Like, should people be doing fasted training? Is it different for men and women? What
Mhm.
about people who say I've been doing it like this for 10 years and it works for me? Like, talk to me about that. Talk to us
Yeah.
about that.
So you're going to hear obviously differing schools of thought here. I am team we eat before our runs. We can find something that if you can find the time to run in your busy schedule, you can do the work and find something that's going to work for you. I think it needs to look different for each person depending on what we're dealing with. And while you'll see like the varying science out there of like, oh, does it cause, elevated cortisol levels, etc.? Can men get away with it versus women? At the end of the day, from just like my practice is that most athletes, endurance athletes who are doing this and like this is not their livelihood, are falling on the line of underfueling. And like this is low hanging fruit to help us meet our elevated needs. It's like one of those easy opportunities to set ourselves up for success for a better run, to not fall into a deficit, right? That we often also see like better performance when we actually have the energy and resources available to perform. We have carbohydrates in that workout. Our body doesn't have to dip as deep into our glycogen stores, which means it doesn't have to work as hard to replenish those glycogen stores. Our muscles then recover better, which I usually try to frame that as like if we're setting ourselves up for a better recovery by eating carbs before and or during our workouts, that means you're going to recover faster and you can keep doing your training like you want to.
Yes. I love that. Can you talk about within day energy deficits and the role that like having a little snack pre-run first thing in the morning may help with and the importance of refueling within a certain period of time post-run?
Yeah, so there is more research out on how detrimental within day energy deficits can be. So like a within day energy deficit is basically like, okay, the person who's like, oh, I only have like 1,000 calories worth of food until 3 p.m. and then I eat 3,000 calories or 2,000 calories to meet my whole day needs. Like that's not ideal because within the day, you are going to be hitting a deficit of energy that your body needs. It's not like there's a ticker of like, oh, we just need to get all these things in within this 24-hour window. So there is more research out on how that can be detrimental, especially runners, endurance athletes. With hormonal dysfunction, when we're thinking about females, like reproductive function, estrogen, right? Males, that was the research on males was a little bit more mixed on how it might impact testosterone levels. There was some research out on cortisol levels as well, how it can negatively impact those if we are allowing our body to get within a deficit within that day. Of course, each individual is very different. So one of the things, just like general guidance, I say every 2 to 4 hours. Some people, it might be eating every 2 hours, and that's what works for like the volume of food they can tolerate, their schedule, they feel good, they're not getting energy slumps in the day. Like, so I like to take that, like we have this concept, we know this is detrimental, we want to avoid these. Okay, but then how are we feeling? If we eat every 4 hours and we're feeling good and we're not getting energy crashes or cravings or eating, like feeling like we're overeating at night and we're recovering well, like maybe 4 hours is your sweet spot and that works with your schedule. Great, grand. But if I have someone eating every 3 hours and they're like, oh, every day at 3 p.m., I feel like I need that another cup of coffee, or I'm really just crashing out. That might be where we look at, okay, like what's going on earlier in the day? Okay, we're eating every 3 hours, but we're not eating enough every 3 hours. That crash out in the afternoon, it's feedback from your body that you need more energy. So like, let's look at the start of the day and see how we can get more energy earlier, kind of shift some things. Maybe they're not getting enough carbohydrate or enough protein. And so taking that, like, okay, we know this is detrimental. We want to avoid it. How does this look for me? Let me trial some timing of my eating and like see how it pairs up around my workouts and see what my body's feedback is. Like, am I feeling strong? Am I feeling good? Are my energy levels good? You know, some of those indicators that our body is getting what it needs.
You mentioned the 3 p.m. slump a handful of times. What role or signal does fatigue play? And how can we understand when it's more than just like we're busy people, so we're tired at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people, just from in practice, a lot of people are tolerating a lot more fatigue than they really should be, because I think it is so like kind of like glamorized that like, oh, like we're doing these hard things, we're pushing our bodies, we're taking on this challenge, like I should be tired. So it is a little bit of a fine line. We should not be like snoozing every morning. We should not feel like we're dragging ourselves around all day long. We should not feel like we need a nap after every long workout. These things will happen from time to time. You know, and especially I think about my female athletes, right? Like sometimes if we're feeling like crushing fatigue certain days, like see how it lines up with your cycle. Some of those hormonal shifts in our cycle can make us more tired. So sometimes it's just like journaling, taking quick notes and kind of seeing, okay, what's the pattern? Is this because like I'm a week out from getting my period and like this is how my body is cyclically each month? Then like what can we do to support that to make you feel a little less awful? But if you're needing a nap after every single long run or most weekends, like that's usually a sign of like, okay, we're missing the mark somewhere here. If we're getting that consistent most days of the week 3 p.m. slump, whenever someone gets tired in the day, I'm like, have a snack. That's even with myself. Like if I'm like, oh, I can't focus, right? Like I don't have the mental capacity to focus on this task I need to get done. Like I usually start with a snack, right? Your brain's preferred energy source is glucose. So other things too, like those early signs of like we might be missing the mark with nutrition, are sleep disturbances. That's a big one for people. Like if you're getting poor quality sleep, you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're having trouble falling asleep. Yeah, that's going to happen sometimes if you're thinking about life stuff or, you know, you have a lot going on, but that can also be an indicator that we're missing something nutrition wise. Obviously, if we're waking up really hungry and we can't fall back asleep, or we wake up starving each day, that's a sign that we need a little bit more nutrition wise, but also that mental side of things, whether it's we can't focus, decrease like coordination, concentration, increase feelings of anxiety. I'm an anxiety girly. If I feel my anxiety is heightened, I'm checking in on my nutrition and be like, okay, wait a minute. Like let's do a gut check here. Do I need a little bit more? Especially of course, if it lines up with an increase in training load. Those are like, and even if you feel more irritable or a flat mood, like always it's nutrition is not always the cause, right? But it's low hanging fruit that like we can make changes on and kind of like use that as like a check engine light.
That makes sense. You talked about or you said we shouldn't feel like we need a nap after every workout. I remember talking to you a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, maybe it was the year before. And I told you that I had started experimenting with high carb fueling and I was putting in like 85 grams of carbs an hour on long runs. And I no longer needed to take a 3-hour nap after my 2.5 hour long runs. And you were like, duh.
Okay, it's because I love you. I'm not that mean.
No, but like it finally clicked, and like I was probably doing 40 grams an hour, which is like a gel or a gel and a half every hour. And we still see people like with their pre-marathon photos of like 3 gels, and it's like, sir, you're not running a 90-minute marathon. You're not running a 2-hour marathon. Like anyone who's doing a 3 to 5 plus hour marathon, like you should be using 6 to 9 gels at least, right?
Yeah.
I mean, individual experiences may vary, but like we're sitting here, the New York City Marathon is this coming weekend, and I am certain that we're going to see a bunch of, and it's not to shame those people, but it's like these people are leaving so much on the table on race day. And if you're leaving something on the table on race day, I can only imagine what's happening in training. And so if you're leaving things on the table on race day, you're probably also leaving things on the table in training. And we spend so much time and effort and money to maximize race day that like adding another $3 or $4 worth of fueling on your run on a long run once a week can have a huge difference on how you not just how you feel, but how you perform. Well, I'll flip that. Not just how you perform, but how you feel.
Yes, both, for sure.
Okay, let's talk about the role that caffeine plays. So a couple of years ago, I was also trying to have a better experience with fueling pre-run and removing like digestion issues on the run or GI issues on the run. So I simplified things down quite dramatically, and one of the things I did was I cut out caffeine, and I felt like my running was crap for a couple of weeks until I made a comment to my coach, and David was like, "Wait a minute, you cut out caffeine pre-run? Like, I wish I knew about this. This all makes sense now." Talk to me about the role that caffeine plays in performance.
Yeah, so caffeine is definitely a tool in the toolbox. It's not for everybody. When we're considering caffeine, there's a few things that I like people to like take into account. One, we all metabolize caffeine a little bit differently. We always want to try out caffeine in a run, before a run, during a run, before race day. Some people can get increased feelings of anxiety. Some people can have GI upset. Even if you drink it in the day-to-day, like those can be effects in our run. So we just want to make sure. But if we tolerate it well, obviously caffeine is a stimulant. It can improve oxygen utilization, reduce feelings of perceived exertion, pain, fatigue, which is why I tend to use it a little bit more in the later stages of my races. I don't tend to love to go out of the gate using caffeinated gels because personally, for me, I like to save it when I know I'm going to be like feeling a little bit of a slump later on in the race. Can boost, it impacts our central nervous system. So it can boost, that improving like alertness and focus, which is sometimes also like I'm thinking about like an Ironman. I tried to save it to the back half of the Ironman, the back 6 hours. So I have a little bit more focus when things we're in it a little bit deeper. I brought up reduced pain perception, and it does that by like blocking some of that signaling. Dosage is important. Like the recommendation is 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight to be effective. And over that 6 milligrams per kilogram body weight in exercise, like there's no research showing that has a higher impact in many people that can also be like too much for their system. I took a Precision 100 gel, which has 100 milligrams in one of those treadmill long run classes to trial it out. And I drink coffee every day. I don't consider myself super sensitive, but I told my friend who was coaching the class, I was like, Adam, I felt like I was having heart palpitations. I thought I was going to fall and you were going to have to peel me off the floor. And this is why we practice it. I'm like, this is too high of a dose for me. So practicing it. And then if we're doing caffeine pre-run, honestly, I'm mixed on if I do caffeine pre-run with coffee, because I find, unless I have a lot of time, that it makes me feel like I have to pee within the first 30 minutes of a run, even if I time it out fairly well. So to me, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for that little boost.
It depends where you're running, and I suppose your gender as well, because I'm running on dirt constantly, and I had this realization when I went back to Boston. I was like, I can't just pee anywhere.
No, you can't. For sure. So like for me, like if I if I'm going out for a run like 11 a.m., like I know I have enough time where I'll have like a cup of coffee. But like otherwise, if it's closer than that, like it's usually not worth it for me, just because that's just how my body's responding. So just like trialing that out. But it's as long as we're getting an appropriate dose, it's super safe, it's effective. So if it works for people, great. But again, just like trial it in training. Cue my experience with 100 milligrams was not for me. So like I think the gels I use are like 25 or 30 milligrams. And like, that's just enough. Like I get a little hit and I see the benefits, but it's just practice it in training. And don't feel like you have to do it if you don't tolerate it, right?
Yeah.
Some people get really upset when they don't. I'm like, listen, don't worry about it.
Do you think that slower runners need as much fuel on the run as faster runners? And well, this isn't a do you think. What does the science say on this one?
Yeah, no, I mean, when it comes down to like fueling, right? It's what intensity are we working at? What duration are we working at? So like a 6-hour marathoner, like I'm certain that 6-hour marathoner, like that is their race pace, right? Like that is, what you're running, your marathon intensity, like equal, right? So it all depends on the person really. And I think oftentimes, I can't say this from personal experience because I am not a 6-hour marathoner, but I think sometimes with everything out there that they have thoughts and feelings that like, okay, like I'm not going as fast as this person, so I don't need as much fuel. I don't deserve as much fuel. But again, like for them, that 6-hour marathon is intense. And we're over kind of like that threshold, right? When we think about grams of carb per hour, we're looking at how long are we exercising, the duration of exercise, right? Thinking about like what resources do we need based on our duration. So when it comes to like grams per hour, this is highly individual depending on like between you and I as runners or people who are faster than me, people who are slower than me. And when I'm working with a client and we're trying to figure out like, okay, what's our carb goal? We take the science and we take those ranges, but we practice it and we think like, okay, kind of finding that sweet spot of like, okay, like, yeah, like 90, even 90 plus grams is research to be beneficial. But like, if this is not something you can execute consistently in your training, that's not a realistic goal. If that's something if you don't feel good at 80 grams, but you back off to 70, you feel great and you recover well and you're hitting your workouts, most of them, perfect. 70 is your sweet spot. And we're kind of hitting that range. So I would handle that with a 6-hour, 7-hour marathoner, the same as I would with, 2.5, 3.5 hour marathon is like, where's that sweet spot for you? Where we're getting that good feedback post run where we don't need to sleep for 3 hours and we're recovering well. And this is something that's realistic for us to consistently practice in training. So I kind of like I think the body size is a great question. And like, I see a lot of people asking that, but I just take that out of the equation. I was like, what are we training for? How are we feeling? What can we, realistically do in our runs? And then we build from there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is effort based, right? So if you're properly racing a marathon, you're high zone 2, low zone 3 if you're faster. If you're slower, you're likely zone 2 and a little bit below, but still within that zone 2. Otherwise, it's not. It becomes a different activity, right? And so you need to fuel a walk differently than a run. But if you're properly racing a marathon, and I don't mean like I'm not shaming people who are running 7-hour marathons. I'm talking like structurally. If you're racing a marathon properly for performance, you are by definition in this zone. So that's the area where that like 70 to 90 plus is going to be effective, where, as you're saying, it's less about the duration and more about the intensity. And so I think an easy way to check in on that is like if you are on the 5, 6, 7 hour side of the marathon, like look at where you are in the 5-zone model and fuel accordingly based on that. This is a plug for Amazfit, which is the watch that is sponsoring this podcast, that has the Helios strap, which is similar to a Whoop band, but it's a more reliable heart rate monitor indicator than just the wrist-based version, and it's pretty great at helping you understand where your heart rate is in that effort, and then dialing in the fueling plan based on where you are in that 5-zone model.
Yeah. And I would say like most people who are aiming like that 6-hour marathon, like that is their they're racing it, right? And I think that's great. And, I also just think about like those athletes who are just out there longer. You were just like out there longer. It's just
Right.
a longer time. It's also too, like, we have to think about it again. I brought up like caffeine's impact on the central nervous system. Like, we got to make sure that our body has the resources to do those basic functions,
Right.
in addition to like running 26.2 miles, which no matter what pace you do it is a long way to run.
I don't even like driving that far. What role does hydration and sodium replacement and electrolytes play in it?
Fueling plan. Yeah. So this is, again, very individual. I was actually just talking to someone before this call, and she was telling me like kind of what happened in Chicago. And she's like, I did my fueling and I felt like I got sick and it was getting hot and I increased my water. And I was like, okay, but we were using lower sodium products and we probably kind of had a little fluid and electrolyte imbalance there too. But yeah, it can be a very delicate balance. It's something that is easier for some people to get dialed in, are lower to moderate sweat rate, salty sweaters. So we're all going to have a different sweat rate. It's going to be based on a number of factors, age, sex, gender, genetics. It's pretty genetic based. I've seen some very small people with some very high sweat rates, some very big people with moderate sweat rates. I've seen normal people with insane sweat rates. So it's definitely a great thing to check in on. We do have like loose guidelines, but I think even just doing like a basic sweat test can be really helpful. You can Google the instructions, like way before, way after, see how much weight you lose, if you're comfortable getting on the scale, right? And then, see what the losses are, aim to replace 50 to 75% of our losses, usually a great place to start. But we need to of course, make sure we're hydrating during our longer workouts, our runs. Our sweat also, we're going to lose sodium the most generously. And again, this is unique. Some people lose a low to moderate amount. Some people, my friend / client, it was my highest sweat test result. He was losing 7,000 milligrams and 70 ounces per hour.
What?
Yes. I had him do a level and sweat test patch. There's lots of, if you are a salty sweater, right? Like you cramp, you feel dizzy, lightheaded after your runs, you have a lot of salt on you. Headaches are a big one. You're more sensitive. You feel like you're more sensitive to heat. Those can be some of those signs that you're a saltier sweater. If you have consistent issues, I recommend that people try to get their hands on some sweat sodium concentration testing. I have an H drop that I use with people locally here to test. But yes, he was like, I cramp a ton. I sweat a ton. I'm doing my first 70.3. We got to do this. And I was like, thank God we did, because it was like 105-degree real feel. And, like he finished, we were using pickle juice. We were using everything. Like, so I always like to say this as well, is that also sodium is having a moment and electrolytes are having a moment, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But I've also had a number of people come to me for fueling plans and they're like, oh, I've been taking 2,000 milligrams an hour. And like, I literally can't stop going to the bathroom. And I was like, well, that's way too much salt. So we need to cut that back. So like, more is not better. It's more about, just like anything, right? Like finding that balance that works for you. And if we are struggling to get that, like the sweat sodium concentration testing can be really helpful to give you kind of like, oh, this is my, where I'm at. Let me, typically with those clients, I come up with a range, like cooler weather, hotter weather, right? Like hotter, more humid environments, some different like pre-run race hydration strategies, in-race hydration strategies. So it's definitely important. And like I said, if we, need a little bit more help, that testing can be so beneficial. So we're not then overdoing it and creating a different set of issues there. But yeah, so much salt.
As a salty sweater with a high sweat rate, I can appreciate the need for more sodium. I sauna a lot, which means I sweat faster, and I already have a high baseline for sodium loss. So good stuff. Double whammy for me. Let's talk about the book. You're a writer. You're also a podcaster. Where did the desire to do these things come from, and what is the book about?
So first of all, I started my podcast because I love your podcast and I love to yap. So yes, I have my own podcast, Real Fuel with SLS. Just lots of good yaps around the endurance space and active space and running and biking and swimming. So if you're looking for another listen, check it out. But yeah, I am an author now. My book, Power Up, A Young Woman's Guide to Winning with Sports Nutrition, is its launch date is November 11th. I co-wrote this with Molly Herford. I know you know Molly, Jonathan.
I do.
Yes, Molly is great. She is the owner of Strong Girl Publishing. So really the goal with Strong Girl Publishing is to get more girls and women in sport and staying in sport. There are lots of great books available in that realm, but we decided we were yapping last year about this time, and she's like, hey, if you ever want to write a book, like, let me know. We were like, there's a big gap in nutrition knowledge for the high school to college age female athlete. Like, there's not a lot of resources out there for that age range. And I was like, I mean, I write articles. I wouldn't say it's probably my strongest skill set. It's definitely something I've worked a lot on over the last 6 years. But she's like, I'll co-author it with you. And I was like, sold. So we wrote it together. She helped me really help get this information in an easy to read and digestible way for that audience. So I think that's one of the things that really sets this book apart is it's not super clinical. It has, of course, science, lots of references, evidence-based strategies, information, but it is written in a way so a high school girl can pick it up and understand it. Their parents the layperson can pick it up and understand it. And, it also does the basics, which I know a lot of people have said to me, well, I didn't really learn nutrition growing up, right? We didn't have a class about carbohydrates or micronutrients or how to fuel workouts. So it does go into that basics and be like, hey, it's all good if you don't know what a carb is. This is what it is. And here's what you need to know. But also how to apply this as a young growing athlete with such unique needs. And then because it's me, I always like to have very tangible things information is great. Knowing what a carb is great, but how do I apply this to my life as a younger athlete? And, we've got little example days in the life of Lizzie is a high school runner living at home in season. This is what her day looks like. And here's why this works to fuel as an athlete. We got examples for all different types of sports, college, at home, off campus. We've got, your first apartment essentials. We got really easy recipes and basics of I know when I moved out, I kind of knew how to cook some stuff, but I didn't know how to cook a lot, right? Grocery shopping 101. So lots of things that these girls can take, or even I feel like any human can take if they don't know the basics and apply to their life as an athlete.
Where can we find this book?
So you can find it at stronggirlpublishing.com. You can also find it on Amazon. You can find it in Barnes and Noble. So right now, as we're recording this, we're still in the pre-order phase. But
when this comes out, it will be available.
Yay! I figured as much.
Yes.
It will be available. Yep. So it's something that I hope starts to land in the right hands, coaches, parents, because we also want it to be a guide for maybe you coach a high school track team and you're I'm so afraid to talk about nutrition because I don't want to say the wrong things and, create bad relationships with food and exercise. Ideally, this also helps guide the girls and how to better show up and be able to speak to providers like doctors if you're confused or you have questions, or if teammates are struggling, tips on how to broach those conversations and really give them the tools that hopefully more girls stay in sport and don't get injured and burn out, and that story that we hear a lot now from older athletes.
Love it. What's been the part of this that you've enjoyed the most, the creation process?
I mean, working with Molly has been so great. Molly is wonderful. she's made it like really fun. Oh, that's a great question. Working with her and just hoping, like the hope that we have that this will start to really land in the right hands and like really shift the environment for younger women in sports away from all of those, what I call horror stories that we hear now from older athletes, to really start to change the narrative. Because, my acknowledgements, I got a little I got some feelings in there. But really, can I read the quote that started the book? So this is from part of my acknowledgements, but to the young women reading this book, I hope this sparks a shift in how you think about food and your body, not only for sport, but to be able to step into your most vibrant and true self. We aren't here to make ourselves smaller, but to take up space and show the world what we're really capable of. And that's really like my hope and dream from this process. So many feels, but yeah, we would love to see it.
Love it. That's a good mic drop moment there. What a cool intro and concept for the book and desire for where it's going. So if you're listening to this, if you're a coach or if you're a parent or if you happen to be a youth athlete listening, welcome and check out the book. Switching topics, let's get into a little myth busting. I love the like you do some of this on social where you're kind of like calling out bullshit. So what do you see people using that is a total waste of money?
Oh, greens powders.
Wow, that was quick.
Greens powders and greens gummies.
Greens gummies. Ooh.
Well, and I need to look into the greens gummies more, but I'm thinking in the context of like creatine gummies, because there's been some talk about that, at least in my corner of the internet, of like it has been shown that they aren't as effective, or the dose is possibly inconsistent as to what is advertised.
Pretty much every product, every creatine gummy product besides Create was shown to not have the like what was necessary. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's because it's something either related to water or heat.
So it's heat when we're thinking in that aspect. And I like read this a while ago, so I don't remember like the exact discrepancies.
It was monumental, again, with everything besides Create.
Yep. So, well, I'm glad that you remembered the Create piece, because I didn't. So I wouldn't like to poo-poo on them. But typically from that, I'm just like, we love creatine, very well researched, one of the safest supplements out there. But like, let's just get it in the powder form and away from the gummy form. So taking from that, I already think greens powders are a waste of money. How effective is it as a gummy?
Makes sense.
If I don't think it's effective as a powder, I wouldn't recommend it as a gummy. It's like one of those things that people are like, oh, well, it's just insurance. No. Like, back to basics with it. I know you have had an undesirable experience with a green powder in the past. I just like, there is a lot to be said about the synergistic effect of food and like getting nutrients from food. Versus like in a powder, obviously supplements are something I use in my practice. They can be very helpful and beneficial, but like being like, oh, I'm just going to throw all of this stuff into a green powder and it's going to cover all my bases. Like, that's a no dog.
One more comment on the creatine. If you're going to take creatine, make sure you use a CreaPure formulation. That's from a specific lab in Germany. You can find this in Momentous. You can find it in Momentous makes a powder. They now make a chewable that's made in a different manner that doesn't use heat. And then you can also find it from Pillar with powder, and there are a handful of other formulations that are effective. Let's talk about another thing that a lot of people, especially us, have opinions on: the role of blood testing in somebody's nutrition journey.
Oh, you're reminding me. I was like, I really need to get another blood test. I am way behind. I don't think I've had one since April. So I'm going to put myself in jail for that. If we can access it, absolutely. even if we're not having crazy symptoms or feeling a certain way, just kind of knowing where we're at is such a helpful tool because, again, just like my high school and college age athletes, even as adults, our needs are, everything is just different versus the regular population. And, again, it's that foundation, right? Like blood testing and those results, like it doesn't automatically equal then I need to supplement. Like, yes, supplements can be a tool that we use, but it can also help us see, like, is our foundation good? There is like underfueling, low energy availability. There's metabolic dysfunction that is a pillar off of that. And I was just speaking at a conference last week with sports medicine physicians. And I basically was like, hey, listen, dyslipidemia, thyroid dysfunction, this can very much in this population be from underfueling. We know the connection between carbohydrate intake and bone health, anemia in bone health. So like, can we catch, suboptimal ferritin before it becomes a sacral stress fracture, right? So like, it's kind of like, even if we don't feel like in our body that we might need it, if we can have access to it and be like, hey, we're good, or like, hey, there's an issue here. What do I need to work on? Now I have some information. Let's go forth.
Do you have more than 2 minutes to go deeper on this?
I sure do, for you.
Okay, great. I do, yeah. Okay, so we've both worked at or with or for Insight Tracker in the past. Yeah. I've also tested with Function. I've done other testing. I'm now consulting with Eternal, who involves a primary care practitioner in that process. What role does an expert play, or should an expert play, whether it's a dietitian, a nurse practitioner, a coach of some capacity? Like, how do we maximize this information and avoid just this like information overload that so many people are we're just collecting so much data?
Yeah.
How do you separate the signal from the noise from the signal?
Yeah. So, and I know we chatted about this in a different spot online, but especially because this is tied to our health, that like having a human being involved, a human being who is qualified to talk about these things, like a sports medicine physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA or even a nurse who is educated in the athlete, in the endurance athlete, not just any physician or et cetera. I think it's important to have those individuals who know the unique needs and like how body systems can be impacted by endurance training or energy availability, looking at this and looking at it with the whole athlete approach. I think that is important because it's just like anything, right? Like good coaches have coaches, right? Like if I look at my blood work and I need a little bit of help, like I have sports dietitians that I know I can tap and be like, what do you think? Because you're an outsider looking in at my life, where we all have blind spots to things. Whereas if we have somebody who is trained in this, who is licensed and legally able to analyze these things, it can help look at the whole picture, look at the whole athlete, but also like provide that empathy. Like this can be scary. Like people, like it's okay to be freaked out if you see your A1C is slightly elevated. Like that is where I am here to say like, hey, like, yeah, like your CrossFit coach might have different thoughts about it, but like here I am as a trained professional and like we don't need to freak out. Here are some actions we can start to take. So I think it's that empathy, looking at the whole athlete, being able to break it down. But a lot of people come to me because they need help implementing it into their lives because they are so busy. So yeah, like it's great to get a list of things you can do to work on it, but that can be overwhelming. And coming up with those strategies to implement it in a practical and applicable way is easier when you have a provider as a teammate per se.
Totally. I wrote a long Substack essay on this that we talked about, and that Substack got more reads than anything else I've ever published on there. So I guess it resonated. And the point I made was I've spent 11 years in the space. I've done all the tests. I've worn all the wearables. Like, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. Especially given Whoop and Aura now offer blood testing as well. And the point I was making is that this is totally commodified. and it has become a game. It has become a race to the bottom from a price standpoint, and a who can spend more from a marketing standpoint in order to acquire as many customers as possible and build a huge database of blood data and wearable data. And so 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, you could look at the companies that existed, and they existed because the science was strong, and they could lead with the positioning of our science is great. We demonstrate results, work with us because you will improve, a la Insight Tracker. And we could say that because it was true. Now everyone can put a wrapper on Quest, and it's or you could just order from Quest, and you can access that data. You can buy from Superpower, and it's $200 a year for 2 blood tests. Like, that business model is reliant on extreme scale and no humans involved in the process. And so I continued to write in this essay, like, where I think the puck is going is, okay, now that the blood testing piece is totally commodified, the guidance is the next frontier. And how do you apply the context of, we have 50 biomarkers, 70 biomarkers, 100 biomarkers, urinalysis, like all of this stuff. What does it mean, and how does it impact me? And so, like, what drew me to Eternal was that there were physicians and dietitians and nurse practitioners involved in that process. And they just launched the primary care offering, where a nurse practitioner explains your blood work to you and what it means and how to improve it if needed. And I think that that's where the future is, right? Everybody is familiar with One Medical, but nobody is satisfied with One Medical. They've attempted scale at such a low price point that it's effectively just a backstop instead of a support mechanism. And so it's interesting to see, like, where do we go from here? How do we continue to involve experts? How do we leverage AI while maintaining the human aspect that can provide empathy or respond to emotions when somebody has low testosterone or high A1C or female hormones that are off? Like, AI isn't the best interface for that unless you are kind of like tip of the spear, extremely rational to a point where, like, you don't have the need to respond to things with emotion, which is not really how most of us operate.
Yep, for sure. 100% agree. 100%.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
I love that soapbox. As like a practitioner, that's what I like to do. I like to help people. No AI. I've never used AI.
What?
I never use AI.
Stevie, we need a session on this. I asked ChatGPT how much time it has saved me in the last year. I spend $20 a month on the lowest tier offering of ChatGPT, and it concluded that it had saved me 6 full weeks of work.
If you see an M-dash, that's just me. I've always been an M-dash user. I know.
It's so great for iterative stuff and brainstorming and going back and forth on, did I miss anything here?
I know, but I will guess, in my defense, one, authoring a book is not something I use AI for. Two,
fair.
A lot of my work is just face to face with human beings, and so there's that too. So,
fair. All right, is there anything you wanted to chat about today that we didn't get to talk about?
Oh man, I could yap about anything and everything. So, for the sake of your listeners, I think we're good.
Stevie, this has been a blast. Appreciate you and everything you do. Where can we find you on your corners of the internet? And remind people where they can buy the book again.
Yes, I know. I'm when I spoke at that conference last week, I was like, I am the worst at promoting myself. I didn't include anything about my business. Did not include anything about the book. Maybe we need to talk offline about that. But yes, you can buy Power Up, A Young Woman's Guide to Winning with Sports Nutrition. It also will make a great gift, FYI, if you got nieces. You can find that at stronggirlpublishing.com or Barnes & Noble or Amazon. It will also be on shelves. You can find me on my corner of the internet at Stevie Lyn on Instagram. You also get a lot of dog content from my buddy Chance. And you can check out my website, which is brand new refresh.
Sweet new rebrand.
Yes, at stevielynrd.com. Learn more about me, how you work with people, and yeah, we'd love to chat with you.
Stevie, this has been great. I got to go fit in lunch before my next meeting on the nutrition side of things, and we'll see you out there.
Sounds good. See ya.